So my name is Sharon Major. I currently work as a community marketer for Prestige Healthcare. So what I do is I go to senior centers, I go to skilled nursings, I go to assisted livings, and I educate people on kind of the continuum of care and how I may possibly be able to assist you, but if I can't, I work with elder care attorneys and all kinds of people that, I can refer you over to. And people ask like what if there's a charge or anything like that, and no, my job is literally to be like a mouthpiece in the community and answer questions. I post on Facebook groups, sometimes people call me from that, and sometimes there's people that I meet in groups like this or say, in a building, and I try to help them that way. A little bit about me. I started doing this kind of work with seniors back in 2003. I recruited physical, occupational, and speech therapists and placed them in temporary assignments in hospitals, nursing homes, outpatients. I got to know what therapists did and how they assisted people, young and old, and I decided that instead of just staffing people, I could go back and be one. So I was in my late 20s. I decided that going for like my doctorate was going to be a little much, so I went to be a licensed physical therapy assistant. So I actually do have the clinical background. I'm still licensed, have been licensed for 10 years. After the staffing, I went and I worked for a hospice covering Delaware County, all doctors' offices, hospitals, nursing homes, assisted livings, being really the liaison between our team and whatever team I was working with. After that, I worked in a personal care and a memory care for the next 7 years. I had a little stint in home health care. I decided that home health really wasn't for me, but I can answer questions on it. And then last December, I went into doing this. So I've been with Prestige for a little bit over a year. I've known the company for a long time. And there's 8 facilities that I cover in the Philadelphia area. One's right down the street, Caring Heart, and then we have 4 in Bucks County, 2 in Delaware County, and 1 in Chester County. So I just try to help people that way. I don't know if you guys can introduce yourselves and just tell me a little bit about what, in a sentence, 2, 3, what you're looking for to get out of the presentation.
I'm Nancy, and right now I'm in my own home.
Mm-hmm.
And probably within, or maybe close to 5 years, I'm looking for a retirement community that's active.
Yep.
That also would lead to the next step if I needed it, in terms of any kind of health care.
Okay.
I do have long-term insurance and short-term, but I've been to a couple of senior.
And do you want to stay in this area, or where are you looking for?
Yes,
Okay.
along Montgomery County,
Okay.
and I'm in Drescher.
Okay.
And the reason that I'm staying put right now is I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old grandson, and they live like 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'm with them in there. So as they get older, they're not going to care about me so much. I mean, it's not that they won't care, but they'll be doing whatever,
Yes.
activities from school, and I won't be the special person that they see
Well, let me just tell
almost
you,
every other day.
my grandkids are 10 and 7, and if my mom, or my grandkids, my kids,
I was just going to say.
yeah, no, my kids, no, my kids are 10 and 7, and my mom is like the special person in their life, and if she lived closer, I live in Havertown, she lives in Gilbertsville, and it's probably a good 45 minutes to an hour for her to get there. And if she was closer, they would probably see her every other day. And she still has that presence with them, even a little bit older. So I think, keeping close to family is super important.
Yeah. Well, my name is Nora Brown, and it's almost ditto what she said.
Yeah.
I dragged her here.
I'm living in my home, and
Okay.
It's a nice little small, almost like an apartment,
Mhm.
2 bedrooms and in Mount Airy. And but it has a good sized lawn. And as I get older, I know that I'm not going to be able to keep up with all that. So like
Yeah.
I said, maybe about in the next 5 years, I would like to go into a nice retirement home. Whether or not I can afford it yet, I don't know.
Well, we can talk a little bit about that.
Yes,
Okay? But Nora, you said, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm Beth. It's kind of similar situation. I'm single, no children, no grandchildren to worry about. I have a sister who's also a widow, and so we're thinking, about a possible move in the next few years, and just kind of trying to get some information.
Okay. I mean, those are great questions, and it's a great time to start. It's interesting. I had lunch with my mom the other day, and her and my stepdad, my mom's gonna turn 70 this year. My stepdad is 76. And I guess I haven't even really paid attention that they're like, for my mom, that maybe they're slowing down a little bit. My stepdad has had some medical complications over the last 20 years that they were together. And I mean, he has significant issues in terms of like taking care of a yard and steps and those kinds of things. But I don't see them all the time. They live an hour away, so it's not in my head every minute of the day. But she said something when we went to lunch, and it really made me think, because one of the things, they've been together for 20 plus years, and what they always liked when they first got together was walking and hiking, and they've owned several like camping trailers, right? Now they're like permanently in a place a couple hours away, and they can go drive there on the weekends. But I guess different than like kind of being a house like that, you have to kind of go and set up this trailer, right? Like you have to make sure that you have all the supplies, right? You got to put out like the roof thing. So there is some like physical labor that goes with it. And then over probably the last 5 years, my stepdad has some issues that have inhibited his like walking abilities and balance issues where he can't, like they used to ride bikes all the time on these trails and walk for several miles and all that, and now that's really not possible. And what she said to me was that this may be their last season for camping, and it really kind of struck me as like, I was like, oh, are you thinking about like, buying a little house instead of that, or you just don't want to do it anymore? And she said, Sharon, we're getting older, like it's not enjoyable anymore the way that it was. And it really kind of made me think about, lots of other things. I think that thinking about this kind of where you want to be in 5 years, your 5-year plan, is important to think about it before something imminently happens, because usually the people that I talk to, they're in crisis and something has happened where they can't return to their home at that moment, or a loved one can't return to their home, and then like, what do you plan for that? There are tons in this area, whether it's Montgomery County or Philadelphia County. If the technical term that they call them is a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, right? But with a CCRC, in most cases, when you're talking about independent living, some is assisted living, personal care. It depends on the licensing. We can talk about that later, but it's not that important. And then you have like skilled nursing if you would ever need that type of care eventually. But what does that look like for someone like you guys? Usually for a CCRC, there's a buy-in. Depending on the one that you choose, the buy-in could be somewhere between $50,000 and $500,000 that you have to give them up front. What I found in all the years in doing this, and I worked for one in addition to like reaching out to them for referrals and such, is that you're either going to pay more on the rent when you move in the independent part, right? Or you're going to pay more on the front end where you give them this deposit. So there are options where if you don't have a ton of liquid cash right away, that you still could go to the independent CCRC and go through the whole process. The other thing that, for you guys is all still an option would be to go to a 55 plus community where you kind of started, like down the street from one of our buildings in Bucks County is a 55 plus, where people stay pretty long, and then if they need the skilled nursing, they go later. It is desirable, if affordable, to be able to go to the CCRC to start, and then you know that that's kind of where you're going to go forever. sometimes people, I found, change their opinion though of the place that they chose. Say, if you find a place that you like next year and you're like, this is the place, I love it, I'm going. And it works for you at the time. You're close to your grandkids, whatever, they have lots of activities. But it's hard because sometimes one part of a CCRC may be amazing and the next part may not be desirable to you. But then you've kind of already committed the money where you feel like you must go to the next part. Where if you kind of do it step by step, you don't necessarily have to do that. There is going to be, when they look at a CCRC, they're going to ask for people to get like a medical screening as well, because they won't let people be part of the of that continuum a lot of times if they have like an active cancer diagnosis or Alzheimer's, because they know that you're going to be using those services.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to elaborate on that question? What exactly?
I was really just going to ask you, like, if you have a diagnosis, and not necessarily cancer, but one that is might progress, or, you know, through the years, would they accept you?
Most of the time the answer is yes. Dementia is something that the cost of care for somebody in the later stages of dementia, and that's what I spent 7 years doing, and it's close to my heart, but it's excessive in terms of they can't say yes to that and know the cost that they're going to probably have to put out, because most likely, even after somebody's diagnosed, they can live 10 to 15 years. Where a lot of that time there needs to be more care. And if you're going to a CCRC, you're thinking that when you need that care, they're going to provide it. The average cost, I want to say, of like skilled nursing this year, like daily rates, are you talking in the $400+ a day? So when you do that out in math, it's about $13,000 a month if you're paying privately. There are a lot of buildings, like the building that I work for, where we can take people that are medical assistants or medical assistants pending. The big thing to know in this whole process is that you want to make sure that if you haven't spoken to an elder care attorney, that maybe you speak to some kind of attorney in terms of your assets, because you have to watch. If you need the Medicaid for room and board eventually, you can't gift things to people. And most of the time, gifting things to people, the loved one isn't thinking about that they're going to need skilled nursing and need Medicaid. So like, let's just say, is it your daughter or your son?
Daughter.
Your daughter. So let's just say your daughter wants to buy a new house next year and you have extra money sitting around at the moment. You don't need it, and you're like, you know what, Lucy, your mom, I love you, I want you to be close to me, I can give you $50,000 towards the down payment of your house. Lucy would be ecstatic. You're doing it out of the kindness of your heart. You have it at the moment to give. Great. The problem is with that, if then in say 4 years, for some reason, you need medical assistance, the fact that you gave Lucy $50,000 4 years ago is going to come back as a penalty. So then what that means is if you needed it at that moment, then you'd have problems getting the medical assistance, because basically the place that you're going, either your daughter would have to pay it back, which maybe she can or she can't, or there'd be months where your stay wouldn't be paid because of the gift. So you can set up trust, you can do different things with lawyers that help in that process, but you have to just understand that even though it's your money and you've worked really hard, and I talk to people about this all the time, there are rules in terms of Medicaid and your eligibility if the government is going to pay your room and board. So there are things that you want to think about, and they consider a gift to be anything more than $500. And they're going to want bank statements, if you need Medicaid eventually, going back 5 years. Yeah, 5
And
years.
isn't it 5 years? Yeah, that they couldn't take her $50,000?
So if you gave your daughter, let's just say, $50,000 today, and you didn't need Medicaid until 5 years after today, that's her money. It's like sunk cost to the government. But
So- oh,
what they're trying to avoid, because I've seen it in the years of doing this, is I'll give you a perfect example. So there was this woman, the building that I worked for before I did what I'm doing now only accepted insurance or private pay, right? So you could only stay if you had your insurance for the short-term coverage, or you could pay privately. This woman came in, she couldn't go back to her assisted living because her disease had progressed so that she needed skilled nursing care. She needed that full-time care. And when they looked back and talked to the family, she needed to go to a Medicaid building because there was, let's just say, $5,000 in her account. That's not even going to pay for a month. But when there was a little bit more question being asked, this woman who did not cognitively have the ability to make these decisions for a long time had paid for both of her grandchildren's education, totaling about $300,000 in less than 5 years. So in the end, I don't remember exactly what happened to her, but I'm pretty sure that her family had to take her home and take care of her because there was not a building that would accept that kind of penalty, because most likely they were never going to get paid for her stay at all. So I bring these things up because it's just something to think about. I'll give you a different example where it totally worked out. My aunt, my dad's sister, I think she's going to be 82 this year. And about 6-7 years ago, she decided her house was too much for her. And she didn't want to sell it. My cousin lived close, but they didn't live in the house that they wanted. So they were going to live with her and then basically build her an addition, right? So she was gifting them the house. Now it's been 7 years. They all live together. Cousin takes care of aunt, all good. But it could have been a sticky situation if she would have needed that care, say 2 years after they did that, because cousin and husband had sold their house, like kind of put all their eggs in that basket. And if she would have needed care, they would have had to go back to that house to use it. So it's worth having these questions before you need to have the questions so that you can properly prepare for what you want. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Couldn't she have deeded the house over at 7 years or whatever, 5 years?
She did give it to them it all worked out, but if they would have tried to make that happen and she would have needed the skilled nursing care within that 5-year window, it would have been a little bit more of a tricky situation in terms of the house, because the house is an asset. And when you're looking at Medicaid, they're looking at you having less than $8,000 as assets because of what people have done in the past. I mean, I talked to somebody the other day, and it was a hard situation, right? Her dad had worked really hard. Her mom and her dad, she said, worked really hard in factories. At this point, the dad was 95, 96. She's older, in her 70s, and she's like, all my dad has in the world is $18,000. And I was like, I'm sorry, but you're either going to need to prepay for funeral expenses or you're going to have to spend down, because at this point, I get that that's his life savings, but if you need his room and board to be paid for, then you're going to need to get to that $8,000 threshold. And there are things to think about before you actually have to make the decision. And when you're talking about a CCRC and that independent living and being lively, most independent livings that I visit are totally lovely. They have a ton of things going on, like a lot of people are participating in them, because they're exactly you guys. They want to have that social interaction. People are mobile, they're able to do it. My advice would be that you really look at the next level when you go toward the independent living, that you look at the personal care or the assisted living and see what's going on there and how you feel about that. And then from there, the nursing home, because the independents usually look amazing.
Right.
And it's really what the next steps are, and if you think that they meet your requirements. But now there are places where you don't have to buy in, and you could just do the rent and start one place. And there's no reason, unless you're locked in financially, that you shouldn't be able to do that. I worked with people all the time when I was in memory care and when I was in personal care that would move from another community for some reason. I'll give you an example of one. We were talking about dementia. One, the wife ended up moving in with me at my community because they didn't have an Alzheimer's dementia unit, and she couldn't go to the skilled because they didn't accept her into the life care program because of her original diagnosis, even though, so she was paying like a daily rate. The husband was in the life care part, the wife was not. So when she needed more care, he needed to pick something that worked for his budget, and the personal care unit was cheaper significantly than the skilled nursing. So she ended up moving in with us. Situationally, things change. So maybe for you, your daughter's here, you love your grandkids, they're all around. You move into one in 2027, and in 2030, your daughter gets a phenomenal opportunity in California. And I've seen that too, where somebody's set up, and then situationally, because their people in their lives have changed or whatever, they need to move one place or another. So I think the questions are worth asking when you're touring these places. If you need to break the agreement, how does that work? How much do you get back of that? Because there are places where you do get money back, but there are circumstances in which you do, and just kind of thinking about that, because I've seen it all, that really is something that happens even if you plan that it isn't, it could happen.
So would you, based on what you said, would you think that it would be better to stay in your home as long as you can? And, for example, if you're diagnosed with Parkinson and you have, you're saying that the skilled they're not going to be willing to take you, to accept you.
I didn't say Parkinson's.
No,
But the answer is probably with Parkinson's, that I don't think that that's one that usually they're going to say that, you're not able to be admitted in the life care program, but it may depend on what your doctor's, form says and what their question in the individual place that you're looking at. If we want to go back, because I use my own family as examples all the time because they know that I use them and I figure it's okay. For my stepdad, he doesn't have Parkinson's, but he has some issues with tremors, and that affects his balance, and he's had different surgeries on his back where they've fused different discs. So all of that, put together, there's no, say, Parkinson's diagnosis, there's no diagnosis like that, but there's a lot of contributing factors that mean that it's difficult for him, I watch when I go over, it's difficult for him to say, mow the lawn. It's difficult for him to even, say, have to move furniture or anything in the house. If my mom has a holiday and they have folding tables, for him to unfold the table and put it, that's something that's hard. Going up and down the stairs can be challenging because with what he has, foot clearance is hard, which is part of the camping, hiking issue, is that he ends up tripping on things. And unlike, I give the example of when I fell the other day into my dog's gate, and yeah, it hurt, and I really for a minute thought that I broke my leg, but 4 or 5 days later it's just a bruise and I'm fine. When my stepdad falls, it can be weeks till he's back to where he needs to be. And if say you're camping or you're whatever, I mean, their whole experience is ruined if he trips over a root and falls. So to go back to your question about the house, do I think that my mom and my stepdad would do well in an independent living community? In my opinion, I don't think so at the moment. My stepdad isn't really into groups, into, committing to things. I don't think that they would get their money worth of going to an independent living. That being said, if they found like a 55 plus condo community, I think for them that would work because they could find some people that liked, my mom likes reading, my stepdad likes fly tying. They could find some people that, without having to pay the cost of all those activities, because the activities cost.
Can I say something
Yeah.
about 55 plus condo communities?
Yeah.
My sister lives in one of those currently.
Yeah,
When they first moved in, her husband was a good deal older than
Mhm.
she was, and she was not really at the age to qualify, but he is now deceased, and so she's there on her own. But she is not particularly happy with this community. One, because of all the conformity rules that you have to abide by. Two, she finds that being older people, they're not so willing to take on responsibilities like being on the board that kind of controls the operation or some of the technicalities of running the community. And the few people that do want to, there's a board I think of 3 people, and it seems like the people that are willing to do this sort of work are sort of people that like being in power and not always so willing to compromise and to listen to concerns of residents. And so and one reason I'm here is to kind of learn about some of these different places, but I think she would be a good candidate for moving out of that condo community now.
well, and it is. So, but how long has she lived there? Estimate.
Let's see, so they moved in, I guess, around 2004. So it's quite a while.
It's quite a while. Did they
Mhm.
like it when they first moved in?
Yes, it was a brand new construction
Mm-hmm.
place, and they have a variety of floor plans in the
Mhm.
options that were available. So that it's a very nice home. It's really more now that she needs because of her husband
Right.
no longer being alive. But I don't think she would want to move into a smaller one and stay in that same community.
But I think that that's a very important point to all of this, is that in 2004, so let's just say a good, like 15, 16 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It worked for her. But all of these communities, no matter where you look at, the difference from 2004 to 2007 could be significant. Or you could like it more in 2010 than you did in 2004.
It didn't take too long for them, even when her husband was
Yeah.
still alive, for them to see some concerns and being unhappy with the way some of the things were run.
And for that, I think, from moving into new construction houses myself,
Not because of the
no, but I think
building.
that there's things that you don't know when you're buying something that's brand new. Now, if you would go look at whatever, whether it's independent living or a community, like I'm thinking of one in my head, of 55 plus, just that's popping in. And the people there love it, but they love it because of this particular community that I'm thinking of. They're a very tight-knit group of people. Now, if I went back in 2 years from now, I don't know if the same people would be living there, interacting the way that they do now. So I think it is interesting to think about your commitment level that you're putting into this place. Because if you're putting all your eggs in the basket, and let's just say, you need to give them, I don't know, $20,000 if you sell your apartment, or you can't have your money until you sell your condo, or whatever it is, the rules. I think it's real important to know that your opinion of whatever place it is, whether it's independent living or 55 plus, could change because what kind of drew you to it could possibly change. Independent livings are great if you're going to do the stuff that's in them. Like, I think if you're going to be a participant and they have knitting club and they have reading club and they have walking club and they have this dinner and they have this, if you do all of that and you know that you're a joiner and that's the kind of environment that you want, and with independent living most of the time there's some housekeeping services and that kind of thing available, and that's things that you want, you're paying for all of that, but you're going to utilize it. It sounds like a great option. I think the difference in why I say for like a 55 plus community, like a condo community for my mom and my stepdad, is that they're not really joiners. They find like a group of friends that they'll be friends with, but all that stuff that you're paying for, I don't know that they would participate. So it's something to think about when you're looking at the cost of what you're going to pay for. Because if you're not going to be part of those things, they're going to really affect your pocketbook. Just a thought. So are you and your sister looking to move to the same one?
Probably.
Like different, like separate apartments or same apartment?
I would say separate apartments.
Okay. What's important to you? Do you mind me asking?
Well, I think the continuing care would be important. When you're no longer able to take care of yourself, definitely, yeah. And not having much in the way of family. It's just basically just the two of us. We have a first cousin, but he lives in Switzerland. So I mean, he's not going to come running over here right away, is he?
Probably not. Probably
and,
not.
There really are no other close relatives in the area.
So thought to self, do you have, and you don't obviously have to tell me, but do you have a power of attorney set up?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
And do you have a backup if the person that you set up?
Yes.
That is really important even for these situations, because if you think about it and you go and you live at one of these places and then something happens where you need to move to the next step, there needs to be somebody that's able to then take on that responsibility. Not that they are paying the bill out of their own pocket, but that the bill gets paid somehow. And I've seen it before where, none of us thinks that we're going to have any kind of cognitive issues or whatever when, at some point we very well may. And if you don't have somebody that's committed to do that, I worked with somebody at my last building, and she did not have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I don't even know if you would consider she had dementia, but she definitely had forgetfulness. And by the time I left that building, it was too hard for her to be able to manage bills and such on her own. They were overwhelming and she wasn't organized with it. Could she live in the apartment and take herself to the bathroom and to meals and, have a great conversation? Yes, but like the nitty gritty of making sure that she paid, her supplemental insurance, and that, if there were bills that came in from therapy or doctors or any of that, that they were paid, could she do that? Not well. I used to help her. But interesting, like she also hadn't appointed anybody to assist her with those things. And she always wanted to say, like, call my son, but her son wasn't technically power of attorney, and her son wasn't really willing to help. So she was kind of in and I don't know what ended up happening, but she was kind of in a quandary where it's not that she didn't have the money to pay for where she was. It's not that somebody wouldn't have been willing to do it, but she really hadn't identified that person, and she was in a place where, like, once her supplemental insurance lapsed, I can't even talk today. Lapsed, thank you, for 4 months because no one paid it, and it was just she forgot to pay it. And it was a huge deal trying to get it back and trying to explain that this woman she didn't mean to not pay it, she just forgot. And these things all kind of happen, and that's why having like a very tight plan for what you want to do going forward makes sense. But whether or not to stay in your house to go back to like circle back to that question, like when is it time? I think when you're not getting joy out of it anymore, and if you're not getting joy, then maybe it's time to move on. But there are people that have lots of money, and if you have lots of money, you could pay for a gardener, you could pay for a lawn person, you could pay for a housekeeper, you could get yourself, a setup that, and you can do all of that if you have the funds to be able to do it. But does it make you happy? And that's the question of like even where you want to go. I think identifying the things that are important. So is it important that somebody, cleans your apartment? Because in a 55 plus community, unless you're hiring somebody from the outside,
Right.
like you're not going to have somebody to do that. Like if you have tremors and stuff, like my stepdad, who weighs significantly more than my mom, like if he would need help showering, like significant help, my mom wouldn't be able to do that by herself. So is there a place that you'd be able to, in independent living, are you able to hire, do they work with a group that could hire you services for that? Like there's lots of questions to kind of identify in moving to the next step. There are great CCRCs out there that people love. And
there's lots around this area.
there's a ton. But I think that you also have to just keep in mind that what you're looking at today may very well look a little bit different in a couple years, or your needs may be different. And a lot of people that I worked with, the families, it really wasn't that the place changed, it was that their needs changed. And so how willing is whatever place you're looking at willing to adapt to your possible changing needs? And that's a question to ask when you go in. But the other thing that I would ask would be to talk to people that live there, to be able to have someone to talk to. Because I'll tell you what, that is a great representation. If they have somebody that's able to answer your questions, and they're going to be able to answer your questions more than even like a salesperson or an admissions person, in terms of like, hey, it's Saturday night and whatever happened, like what do you do? Or what groups did you join? Do you find that there's lots of activities going on? Like there's people, if you can talk to somebody, I think it would answer a lot of whatever questions you had for a potential place.
Now, I've been to Anne's Choice a couple times,
Mhm.
and even though I don't think I can afford it, but when they have their lunches, they have ambassadors sitting at the table.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like everything is positive, and you wonder whether you're getting the whole picture.
Well, I think you have to, this is my thought, is people are positive. Like I always feel like I'm positive about, I'm a marketer, I'm positive about the place that I work. But if you ask me a specific question, personally, I'm not going to lie to you. So I'm going to answer your question. I think if you come to that lunch, wherever you're going, whether it's Anne's Choice, doesn't matter. And you have some questions that, if you ask somebody if they're happy, they're probably, as an ambassador, they are happy. That is why they're there being an ambassador. But if you ask them something specific, and I don't know, you pick it. Like, have you ever fallen and somebody has had to come get you? And what does that look like? Like, do you wear a pendant? Like, how long has that taken to have, like, for somebody to respond to that? If you ask a question like that, it's not that they won't say that they were helped and that it happened quickly, but I think you're going to get a different kind of answer than I love the meals, because that's like the happy stuff that's why they wanted to be an ambassador. But maybe too, after the lunch, you ask the salesperson if there's somebody else that you could talk to, like not just an ambassador, just, is there somebody that is in, like, I'm just picking walking club because my mom likes that. Like, is there somebody in walking club I could talk to? I want to find out more about that. Because then you could talk to somebody that has similar interests in things that you want to do and see if those those needs can be met there. But I agree, like if you just go to the lunch, everyone's like happy, it's a great lunch. But I think it's kind of digging a little deeper and seeing what else you can find out. And there may be personal things that happen in your own house that you think about. Whether it is like if there's something medically that goes wrong or just the logistics of it. But if you have a list of questions, I think when you go, it's easier than if you just go in and then think you're going to think of something, because it may not come to you at that moment.
Yeah, this is a good topic. I belong to this particular church,
Mhm.
Presbyterian Church, where we
Yeah.
are right now, and there are a number of people in the congregation that now live in various acts, retirement, the CCRC
Yeah.
communities, and there's a couple that live over on Ridge Pike at the Masonic Village,
Mm-hmm.
and a few at Cathedral Village. So there are people around to ask questions, that, you know, and I've been to visit some of these people and been in their apartments, and most of them are quite happy where they are. So if you belong to a church, or, you know, and have other people in the congregation that are in this type of situation, that's a good resource, I think.
I think that kind of resource is perfect. I mean, something that I do now, that I don't think I did 5 years ago. There are a lot of Facebook groups too, if you're a little bit savvy, where you could pose a question on, you know, looking for senior care. You could find like a senior group or whatever, if you don't belong to a church or anything like that, and say, you know, does anyone live in a senior care community that they're happy about? Like, what are your positive and negative thoughts? Because I think getting an additional person besides the ambassador that's going to give you the good and the bad will give you a better idea of the place. Every place is going to have positives and negatives. Mm-hmm. It's about if it meets your needs, mm-hmm. right? And you want to make sure that you know the place that you're going into, and you know that it will fit what you need at that moment.
Is there another type of retirement place other than CCRC that you?
Well,
not the over 55, but
you have to just ask now, because some CCRCs are buy-in and some of them are kind of pay as you go.
Okay.
After mm-hmm. 2008, when that financial crisis kind of happened, it became harder for CCRCs, because of people's investments, you know, losing money and all of that, for them to pay that, say, like $500,000 buy-in. So they got creative with their payment plans and their structures. So a lot of times now, there's different ways to pay. Like, I've seen them where you pay more to go in and your monthly rent is less, or you pay less, or you don't pay anything to go in and you have a higher monthly rent, but you really don't have the commitment with that. Like, you have like a 30-day mm-hmm. notice commitment, but it's not like you're giving them $500,000 to start. And depending on your level of commitment may depend on that. Like, if you know 10 people that live in this place and they're all 10 people are happy, and you know that they offer this, this, and this, and this is what you want, then maybe you are like 99% sure that this is the place for you. And maybe giving that extra money up front to then pay less per month makes sense. But maybe you're not sure, you know, what the future holds, and if this is going to be 100% the place for you, and maybe you want to pay more per month, but have the ability to pull out when you want to. Mm-hmm. Because I know that there are places where basically it's like, I worked with a woman who was sort of, I don't want to say purchasing a condo, because it was in a CCRC, but that's kind of how they did it, was you paid some money up front and then you paid for whatever, you know, the 1 or 2 bedroom was. So like in her case, I don't know, it was like $215,000 for the one that she wanted. But if she would have passed, until they resold that condo, her estate, whoever was going to get that money, wasn't going to see any of that money until they resold it. So depending on if they had 2 available or 26 available would probably depend how quickly that money would go back. And is that important? Maybe yes, maybe no. But there are a lot of things to think about when you're going to see any of these places in terms of what are the financial requirements, what kind of incentives do you have, and what happens if my situation changes.
So I have a question, and
Mhm.
I don't know if it's dumb or it's out
It's
of
never
your
dumb.
range, but take average people like myself. I'm single, like there are no children.
Mhm.
You know, I have brother and sister, but they're away in Florida. And is there a system that is set up for people like myself or others in my category? I have property, 2 homes, and an average income coming in monthly. Say something drastic should happen to me and I can't take care of myself. Is
Mhm.
there a place that is set up that would be able to take me in, take care of me, and take what I have?
Yeah, so like a skilled nursing would be able, like, I, God forbid, but if, say, in 2 weeks, something happened, there was an accident, and you no longer could walk, and you needed somebody to be, like, you were pretty much bedbound, and you needed to live in a place and have somebody take care of you. Are there places that do that? 100%. But here's the question, and here's where, like, the holdup would come in, and kind of why we talked about those legal things before. Is there somebody that you can have that if that happens to you and you can't make these decisions, that would be able to sell those properties so that then you could go forward, spend down, and go to Medicaid? Because if you don't have somebody to do that, the process becomes a little bit more complicated because you're not quite eligible for the government assistance because you have this money to spend down, but you don't have an advocate in which to be able to make those things happen.
So
you're
when
saying
you say,
that
when you say
you have to get down to the Medicaid level to make this
To make-
happen, unless you have loads of money.
Well, no, I'll give you an example. I can give you like real examples that so say, let's just say you have, Nora, $100,000. We won't even talk about properties. You have $100,000. You have it in some kind of mutual fund somewhere, and then you have a checking account of $3,000. Okay? If you would need skilled nursing, you would need to spend down to $8,000 total, right? To then have that Medicaid be able to kick in. But you would need to, they would have to know like where these things existed so that they could pull out this mutual fund and spend down. They 100% can do that, and people do it all the time.
but when you're saying spend down, I mean, are they spending it on my care? Or?
Yep.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep. So then the nursing home would take their
Oh.
private pay rate of, let's just say it's $13,000 a month. They would take that till you got down to that $8,000.
Okay.
But what you can, there's things that you can do. There's trust that you can set up. There's, you can prepay your burial expenses. Like I believe the rate for last year was somewhere around like $13,000 that you can put either into an account or you can pay for everything that you want. So you can have that stuff done so that once you spend down your money, it's not like somebody's going to have to spend all this extra money after you're gone. You can set all of that up, but I guess my point to the whole conversation is thinking about these things before you get to the point where you're in the hospital, God forbid, your leg is broken, you can't go home, or whatever, and you now have to think of this thing now, and you can't, and I've seen it, and there was a woman that was in a place that she couldn't pay for, but for longer that she needed to be, because she didn't have anyone and she didn't remember where all, like, what her savings account was. She didn't remember all this stuff, and in the end we were able to contact her brother in another state and but it literally took like 4 weeks, and she was very stressed out about it and wasn't sure if we were going to be able to make it all happen. And in the end, it worked, but it would have been much easier for everyone if all of it was kind of laid out first.
Yes, okay.
And then she would have had more options into what the next step was. But because she didn't plan ahead, it wasn't as easy to kind of make those decisions for her.
A power of attorney would do that? Okay.
Yeah. And power of attorney only goes into effect when you're not capable of making the decision anymore.
Okay.
So it's just important to have, because at some point you may not be able to make that decision. And the other thing you want to make sure is that whoever is that power of attorney is in line with you. They know exactly what you want, exactly what they should do. Because maybe, Nora, you have $100,000, and maybe your goal in life and in care is that that person spends down to that last bit of money so that you can stay in your home before you go somewhere. Then you want that person to be able to do that, have the authority to do that, make sure that they know they have to keep the receipts, so then when you need to go to the next step, you can do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But no, there's 100% if something happened, there'd be a place that could help you. But when you don't have the ability to have somebody kind of take care of those transactions that you can't do, and if you're stuck somewhere because your leg's broken or whatever it is, I've seen it now because of a lot of internet fraud and all of that. Sometimes banks are nice and they'll do things over the phone for you. Sometimes they won't. And a lot of times they're not sympathetic, and rightfully so, because of everything that's, gone on digitally and everything. But there have been cases that I've seen that it's like, do you want this place to write a certified letter? What do you need to be able to access these records? They're like, no, you need to come in. How can the person come in? They're bedbound. What do you want to roll a stretcher in there? And it's just real challenging. So to think about all of this in advance.
I experienced that with my mother. My mother is going to be 97 next month. And I do everything for her. And I went to get a property receipt for her for a property tax, and they put me through the ringer and asked me to take her down there. She can't come down there.
Yeah.
And so I went straight ahead, and we got the power of attorney a couple weeks
It's
ago.
so much easier. And the other thing that I found for my in-laws is when my mother-in-law's mom was really sick, she kept all of that stuff, the living will and the power of attorney, a copy of it on her phone, because she never knew when she was going to need it. If, her mom ended up in the hospital or something and she was running around, she had it on her phone, and at least they were able to see it. Yes, usually she had to bring back the other copy, but keeping a copy, where it's close and you can have it so that people can see it, because it's great to have it, but if no one can find it, because I've heard that too. I did that, but I have no idea where it is. There's no one that can find it, and then it's just like not having it. So you need to make sure that, you and whoever else have the power to be able to execute it. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a couple. If you're in say a dementia situation,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the medical power of attorney,
Mm-hmm.
at what point do they decide, whoever, that you're not capable? I mean, do you have to be totally not with it?
Well, so I've seen it both ways, to be honest. Again, you can be diagnosed with an Alzheimer's or dementia, 15 years before, the end comes. So what does that mean? So it means really for a lot of people that they're living at home and either independently or with a spouse or whatever, with a sister or a brother, they're living with that person for a while, usually, unless it's rapidly progressing, before they go into a place and need care. Usually when people move into either a skilled nursing or personal care for dementia, there's something that's changed. Let's say, they're no longer able, for my mother-in-law, for her mother, it was when she could no longer go up steps anymore and she was totally incontinent and not able, like, to be able to ambulate, like to walk anywhere with a walker or whatever. At that point, it was too much care for my mother-in-law and she needed to have her mother go someplace. So usually it's if somebody is wandering, and wandering isn't usually they're trying to run away, it's just they're confused and, you know, it's no longer safe to have them be at home because they could do these things in the middle of the night and you're trying to sleep and you can only have so many hours in the day. But when does somebody decide that you're incompetent? I mean, usually a doctor has to administer that, but it's usually more than one person unless they're going before a judge, which hardly ever happens. Because anybody can score, they have tests like a BIMS, a mini mental, a MOCA, like they have all these tests that they can do that say that, you know, you basically are able to make these decisions, or as you score lower on the test, you're not. But you would hope that with the person that you're choosing to be your advocate, your surrogate, your power of attorney, that they are on a parallel point with you. So I've seen it where people will collaborate with their loved one, even if they're not fully able to make the decision, that they're talking to their mom, they're talking to their sister, they're talking, you know, to their uncle to see what they're feeling about things. But part of it too is you really need to have those conversations before, because if something happens, I've seen it where like somebody has dementia or Alzheimer's and they're pretty much like getting along, making their needs known. I mean, they might not be able to do everything independently, but they're doing okay. And then there's a fall or something, and all of a sudden that dementia has accelerated and they need somebody to make those decisions. It's real important that you have the person, whoever you choose, knows what kind of decisions you want and that you're very clear with that. Some people have in their documentation, I've seen, you know, the medical power of attorney where it's like 10 pages long and it lists everything individually that somebody wants or doesn't want. Some people's is very simple. It just depends on the person. But there are some people's that like says, I never want tube feeding, or, you know, keep me alive for 30 days until this blah, blah, blah. I never want IV hydration, or I only want this app. There are ones that are totally specific. But if you have a person that you trust to do right by you and you guys have had that discussion, I think it's also important to have the discussion and not just assume that they know what you want. And it's an uncomfortable discussion to have, but it's important because you want, if something happens, that that person is going to be able to make the decisions as you would want them to be made.
Now, my other question, well, I have two. I'm going to be 79 next week, okay?
Never would have guessed.
But if I wait 5 years and I'm, you know, let's say 84, do they, if you go in independently,
Mm-hmm.
but you're already old, do they, like, sort of factor that in, that maybe in 2 years, because age, that I might need?
Well, it kind of goes more down to your medical exam. And again, if you're, people now are waiting longer than they did before. So if you looked like 10 or 15 years ago, people were going into independent living sooner. They were going into personal care sooner. They were going into skilled nursing sooner. Variety of factors have made people wait. And so now you're seeing people that are sicker that are going into all levels. So I don't think, based on what I know, that is going to be the factor, whether you're 84 or whether you're 64, because I've seen people that are 64 that are way worse medically than somebody that's 94. But they do that comprehensive medical exam, you know, before you would get into a life care program. But again, that's a life care program where you pay in and they're going to guarantee that when you need a skilled nursing bed, that bed is available as long as, you know, they can take care of you. There are other programs where you're kind of just buying for your time. at that moment. So my suggestion is to also make sure that you visit several places and find out what one is offering versus the other. Because it is a business and they do want your business in most cases. So what is it that, you know, they want and what is it that you want? But no, their rates are printed out, so it's not like they're gonna give Nora one rate and give you one rate and give me a different rate. The rate is the rate, but you have to qualify with that exam. So it is worth thinking about, you know, if this is something you're looking about in the future, to going and asking them what the requirements are, like the application packet or whatever. And you could take a look and see what all of that is. Because what if circumstances change and you want to do it this year instead of next year? You might want to know what all of that looks like.
Nora and I have been to a couple like this sort of situation. And in one case, they highly recommended that you choose an ACTS community.
Was it in?
Because in a financial situation,
Uh-huh.
some of the others, let's say, they invest
That's for
And-
profit.
Oh,
Yeah.
a for-profit
But-
versus a not-for-profit?
but the ACTS are nonprofit.
Yeah, but that can, so I would then play the devil's advocate and say that that could change. I mean, you could go in and something's a not-for-profit and they could change and be a for-profit. I think you need to look, there are many communities that are out there, acts, not acts, that you could look at and say, what meets my needs? I think, you know, I've talked to people before that was the only kind of community that they would look at, was a not-for-profit. I think you have to look at the history of the place, and I think that's sometimes why it's hard to look at a brand new construction, not because it's new construction, but because there's no history. There's no history to be able to say, like, this group of people is really happy here, and this is how it's run, and this is the way it's been run. Can things change? Sure, they can change. But also, if you look at this group has been happy for this long, and this is the way it's been done, you can think that that's probably how it's going to continue to be done. But then you also go back to what's your out, you know, and if something does change and it makes you unhappy, how do you rectify that? You don't want to be stuck in a place for 5 years if you don't want to be there anymore.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm due somewhere at 12.
No, go ahead. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
But yeah, I think there's just a lot of questions, and the more questions you ask, and I think that personally, I think that, you know, going to lunch, you could see like a little representation of it, but I think that that's a very small representation of what your day would be like there. I think it would be much more relevant, let's say, if you knew an activity that you liked and you went to join somebody that did that activity and talk to somebody that wasn't necessarily an ambassador, but a real person, because you know what? They chose to move there, and they had reasons for doing that, but maybe there are these 3 things that are, you know, that bother them. Maybe those are totally fine with you. Maybe those are just, one of those things is just something that is not okay. Maybe then you have to investigate further if that's the kind of place that you're interested in going.
Do you ever privately work with?
You can call
Or
me.
are you more, you know, like where an individual would pay you to sit down and look at different situations?
I don't get paid. I mean, I get paid. I work for a company, but if you wanted to talk offline, I'll give you my card and we could have another conversation. 100%. I've done this for a long time, and I feel like, here's my thing, is I hope that when either, like say my mom needs it or I need it, that one day someone will help me the same way. So I kind of think that it's just, if I have it and I can help you with it, I'm going to help you with it. That's what I do. That's kind of it, I think.
I think another thing to consider maybe as to where you're moving is whether you want to continue with your current doctors also, and are they going to be close by? You mentioned Ann's Choice before. I know where that is
Mm-hmm.
approximately, but it's not necessarily something that I would consider because I'm used to this vicinity, this area, and
So-
all my doctors are right around here.
This is what I would tell you in general, in terms of like working with a place and with physicians. So there's something to consider. If any of the four of us needed to go to the doctor today, like if I got sick, you got sick, whatever, we'd call our doctor, we'd make an appointment, right?
Yeah,
How often do you call your doctor?
only when I need them.
So how often is that? In like a 6-month period?
Oh, well, the primary doctor, right now, generally only see her once a year.
Okay, but that's a good, me too, right? So if I'm calling the doctor, it's out of the ordinary. I think I have the flu or something like that. A lot of times when people are in personal care or in skilled nursing, there's a lot more things that are going on, medical things with them that somebody may be calling a physician about. Because that's why you're there. Your condition has advanced so that you can't live independently anymore, right? So my experience is this. In an independent living situation, any doctor you want to be your doctor, as long as you're able to get there and you have that relationship with your doctor, perfect. In a personal care / assisted / skilled nursing, having your own doctor is good, except it can be challenging because a lot of times those nurses are working 24 hours, like they have shifts of 24 hours, right? So Nora, say there's something that goes on with you sorry, I'm picking on you, at 2 o'clock in the morning and the nurse sees it and they want to call the doctor. What would happen if they called your doctor at 2 o'clock in the morning?
It's probably not going to answer.
Or the answering service would answer and say but that's it. They would say to go to the ER.
Right.
But maybe it's as simple as you have diabetes and they need to give you a different level of insulin, right? And if you had somebody that was answering that call, that person would have told the nurse to do that, and you would stay where you were instead of having to go to the ER, get all, whatever, possibly get admitted, all these things going on. Maybe they could have handled it right there. In my experience, unless it's a doctor that wants to deal with that 24-hour kind of call situation, when people's medical needs become more complicated, a doctor that sees people primarily in the office isn't the same kind of doctor that does see people in a facility. I love my doctor, right? He's great. His wife is great. She's the nurse. I love that it's just him. I can call. They'll take care of me. But I'll tell you what, if I needed something in the middle of the night,
Yeah, you get an answering service.
I'd get an answering service that would say to go
Somebody's
to the ER.
on call.
Right.
Really good, right.
And when you get more into that continuum of care, it a lot of times doesn't make sense as much. They have services now called concierge services for physicians. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. So in the concierge model, they're looking at a physician is paid a yearly stipend plus whatever they get from your insurance. So you could choose, Nora, Dr. Smith to be your doctor. That means you have access to Dr. Smith for, let's say, $1,500 a year. Now, in that model, I've seen it work better in assisted living or personal care because you're paying for it, but that doctor is willing to answer those calls at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, on a Sunday. So you're not going to the ER unnecessarily. Your calls are being answered. The nurses' calls are being answered quickly. You're getting the care that you need. That's one of the main issues in terms of, I think that people don't think about when they're going into like an independent living, assisted living, nursing kind of facility, and physicians, is that the kind of care that you get outpatient at your house is very different than the care that you're going to get in those later levels. So does it make sense at the time? Now, that being said, there are people, like I worked in Bryn Mawr before I did this, and there are people that were lifelong mainline health people. So they wanted to pick a building that would be like the 911 hospital, that the doctors would be associated with mainline health. So if it's a hospital system that you're interested in, you could totally pick your place around the hospital system. But if it's one doctor, you have to figure out if that meets what your needs are.
Don't some of the facilities have a doctor
Mm-hmm.
there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not
They all
me,
do.
but I mean like
Right.
that, okay.
They all do. It's just a matter of whether or not you choose to go with that physician. But they all have, like a doctor associated with them, or a group of doctors, or multiple doctors.
But
In-
then you have to make sure they take your insurance, right?
It's not as much usually an issue of them taking the insurance. It's more figuring out, which is totally a different conversation, which we could have a different day, about what type of insurance you have and if that insurance meets your needs. I didn't really, in the 7 years I was in personal care and independent living, I think twice I saw it as an issue with the physician and the person. But what I did see a lot was issues with the insurance and different providers, not like the main physician, but other issues. And so it is something to consider when you're changing your venue, if your insurance, again, another conversation, but if your insurance meets your needs, like your current needs. Yep.
Now, does a power of attorney, is it standard, or are you able to put what you want into it?
Like the language is standard in terms of there's certain things in order for them to be official that need to be stated in the power of attorney. But there's other things that you can add if they're specific to you, like your requirements, because then in the end, you and the person are signing with a witness and like a notary seal, so it's official. But there's certain wording that needs to be in there for it to be like a legal, durable power of attorney. But I've seen longer ones and shorter ones, so, and they were legal. It just depends on the person. I mean, truly, getting those documents done by an elder care attorney may be worth your time. It's not super expensive. There's all different attorneys that are around that will do it, and for a reasonable cost, to be able to put that stuff together for you so that it's ready. You can do it on your own though too.
Yeah.
Up to you. But before you just go to like the internet and download a document, you want to make sure that's more of my advice, that it's
Legal in the state that you're in.
that it has everything that it needs to have. Yeah.
How does one get the lawyer? What's the lawyer?
An elder care attorney?
Elder care attorney.
Well, I could give you a couple names of ones, or so I believe in the state of Pennsylvania there's like 60 that are actual like elder care attorneys. As I've worked with a lot of them for years, and so what they say is like if you were going to have like a malpractice suit, you want a malpractice attorney. If you want to make sure that you have all your documents together, you want an elder care attorney, because that's all they do. They stay current on all of those laws. There's all different kinds of packages they do for people. They do life care planning for people. They do all kinds of stuff. But they also just do the standard documents so that you have your financial power of attorney, you have your medical power of attorney, because there are two. And they make sure you have all that stuff in order. And that you have copies of it, and whoever needs to have copies of it is. But they do that.
And the financial power of attorney give that person the right to use your spend your finances according to your wishes.
according to your wishes, correct. Which if somebody, and that's where I've seen a lot of issue, if you don't appoint somebody to be that person, and then there's some question about payment of something, and you have someone that wants to do that, it's hard for them to get the paperwork they need, say from the bank. I had a situation once where there was a power of attorney in place, and then at the time the daughters couldn't find what they needed, and they were trying to pay for their mom's care, and the place that they were trying, and they were trying to do the right thing, but the company that they were trying to get it from refused to even speak with them until they had the power of attorney, which they couldn't get a new power of attorney, because at that point their mom was not able to complete one. So it was a real frustrating situation for, everyone involved, because, you had people trying to do the right thing, but, and then sometimes you could call a bank and they'll give you the information that you need, but you never know.
I know. I banked with this gentleman, he opened my account, we sat there, we talked forever. I went back the second day to order some checks, he asked me for my ID. I didn't have it, I couldn't order the checks.
I know.
Yeah, so.
No, I'm with you. But there's a lot of considerations, I think, when you're looking at the next step and how it meets everything that you're looking for. But I'm sorry for your sister that she found a place that she doesn't really like. But it makes sense that you guys are trying to go to a place together. Yeah, she's just telling me it's time.
Good, you've got a little time, don't rush, you're fine.
No, we're good. A couple minutes.
Take your time.
I have done these things via my attorney, but he does a lot of wills and
Mhm.
that's kind of his area.
Yeah.
So do you think I would still need to go to an,
Not unless you're looking at talking about estate planning, and if he doesn't do that. I mean, if it's somebody that you respect, you should be able to ask them, like, is this the type of thing that you do?
Right.
And, there are people that are more versed than other people, and they should tell you, like, yes, I can help you with this estate planning to make sure that, you're going in the right direction for everything. He should be able to tell you that. But the important thing is that you have those documents, and if you have those, you're a step ahead of a lot of people.
So the main two documents is the financial and power.
Yeah. Yeah, because you want somebody that's going to be able to make your medical decisions, but that person may or may not be the same person that's going to make the financial decisions.
I see. Good.
I know, it's a lot.
Yeah, but good information, good information.
Thank you guys for coming. I'll give you my card if you need
Yes,
anything.
please.
yes,